This is Ben. This is an edition of React Hacks. Today I want to show you this feature I built that will activate a user's account using email. And so if we sign up a new user, we're going to enter in an email. I'll enter in my own for the case of demonstration. We'll make a new user. We'll say grapefruits because I'm born in Florida and grapefruits are a thing down there. Oh, I mistyped my password. And if we successfully created a user, this little message is going to pop up down here. It says, check your email to activate your account. So let's see what's going on here. If I look inside my database, we'll see that I've created a new user called grapefruits, and there's this column called activated, but right now it evaluates to false. And so before the user has access to all of its features, we need to activate the account. And we're going to do that by checking the email that I've just sent to the user. And we're going to click on this activation link that's inside of the email. And that activation link is going to include the token which I've just created, as well as the user's email address. And when we look at the code, I'll show you how we get that information. So you click on this link, and in the backend, I've now activated the user's account and I can log in. So if I refresh my database, you'll see now my user is activated. And if I go ahead and log in, my typing is bad, so let's see if I can get through this without any typos. Alright, log in. And there we go. We are now logged in as a new user with an activated account. So to solve this large problem of creating an email activated user, I broke that down into 5 smaller problems. The first is to update the user model. The second is to create account activation controller. The third is to create and hash the activation token. The fourth is to create the mailer, which I'm going to call user mailer. And then finally, the fifth step is to send the actual email. And let's take a look at how that's happening. So the first step, update the user model, and we can look at the schema to show you what I'm talking about. I've added 3 columns, this boolean of activated, which will default to false, the user's email, and then this token, which I'll generate, called activation digest. The second step is to create account activation controller, and you run a Rails command called Rails generate account activation controller. And this is what's going to allow me to create this edit route. So if we look at account activation controller, there's going to be this function called edit. And in order to get there, we'll look at this file called routes, where I've created a route for account activations, and it's only going to use this function edit. And since we're updating a user's model, that's why I decided to name this edit. And inside of this edit function, we're going to look up the user from the parameter email, which was sent in that activation link. And we'll go over how to create that link in just a moment here. We're going to look up that user, and we're going to check for 3 things. First of all, if that user exists. If that user is not activated, because we don't need to activate an already activated user. And finally, if the token inside of the user's model matches the token from that activation link, if all 3 of those things are true, then go ahead and activate the user. So the third step is to create and hash an activation token. And if we look at the model/user, we're going to see a few functions that we need to run, and I want to run them before we save and create a new user. The first is going to lowercase the user's email, and then we're going to create the activation digest, the activation token. And so if we look down here for create activation digest, I'm invoking these 2 functions I've written, new token and digest. And new token is going to create a random base64 URL, so just a big string of random letters and numbers. And then digest is going to use jot to hash that token. And so now a user has a hashed unique token saved to their model. The fourth step is to create the user mailer, and what you're going to want to do is run a Rails command called Rails generate mailer, and then I've named this mailer user mailer, and this is going to do two things. It's going to make the email template, and it's going to create this activation link, which I've brought up several times. So if we look first at user mailer, this is where I'm going to look up the user, and then that's how I'll know which email address to send this email to. And I'll show you in the next step where we're going to use this function, account activation. But before we get there, I want to show you the template that we've created, and that's going to be an account activations.html. And this is the template for the email. So when you send an email, I'm writing this HTML to show you what the email will look like. But the really important step is this link here, and it's inside this link that I'm using this function edit account activation URL and passing to it the token which I've saved inside of the user model. That's the hash token, and then the email address. And this is how I create that activation link. So when I've invoked functions that need to access the user's token or the user's email, it's through this link that those functions are going to access those bits of information. And so now we're on to the fifth and final step, and that is to actually send the email. Or we're going to look at the user's controller to show you where we're going to do this. So user's controller. And in the create function, what I'm going to do is use user mailer. That's the mailer that I generated, and then invoke that function I wrote called account activation, pass to it the user, and this is how we're going to know which email address to send the email to. And finally, invoke this method called deliver now. And so just to run you through the steps one more time, basically we've created this randomly generated token and hashed it for security reasons. Then I'm going to create this link with the user's email and that hashed token. I'm going to compare the token in the link to the token in the user's model. If those two match, then I'm going to activate the user. That's kind of the logic of this feature. And there are probably a dozen smaller steps I didn't go over in this exercise because they're specific to configuring your mailer and whatever service you decide to use to actually send the email. For me, I used a service called SendGrid, and there is a specific set of configurations that you have to follow in order to set that up. But if you look up another service, you'll need to follow their configuration, and I didn't find it necessary to go over all those little detailed steps here. But what I will do is add a link to this article I found which helped me build this feature, and it goes in depth into all of those steps, and I highly recommend reading it if you wanted to build this feature for yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.